Wonderful. Um, so, my talk is, or my recent work has been responding to Helen Ross-Wodowski, who is a cultural historian of the ocean. She's been calling on scholars from across disciplines to contribute to the creation of new narratives that might support better understanding of the marine environment and our ever-changing relationship with it. In my view, part of that work should also be the critical examination of existing cultural configurations of the ocean, asking what do these actually tell us about the human and more than human ecologies of the sea? And what has been the role of music in sensorially substantiating or bolstering particular cultural arrangements of the human ocean relationship? In other words, what kinds of encounters with the ocean are facilitated by the sensory qualities of music, as music works in tandem with historically situated and contingent knowledges and visions of the marine world. So the ocean is familiar terrain for scholars of music and culture. From Paul Gilroy's The Black Atlantic onwards, many scholars have positioned the ocean in the center of their model. Yet at the same time, the ocean itself tends to remain invisible. The ocean is often positioned as a flat surface or a stage upon which human history happens. John Epper-Yeshe argues that this flattened model of human movements across surfaces makes it hard to see, think about, or act on the ocean as an ecological system, as a space of multi-species entanglements and deep, more than human temporalities. But I think things are changing. Knowledge of anthropogenic ecological breakdown and rising sea levels are amplifying the presence of the ocean in popularly mediated representations of climate crisis. A new era of marine awareness is certainly underway. And also within academia, people like Elizabeth Delory has sketched the rise of a new oceanic imaginary, as she calls it, which drives a shift in perspective from surface to submersion. The emerging interdisciplinary conversations called the Blue Humanities involve new engagements with ontologies of the sea, no longer seen as being outside human history, but rather central to our Anthropocene futures. Though it must be acknowledged that even if this turn towards the ocean is a recent intervention in certain Western academic contexts, blue knowledges and practices are, of course, already integral and have been for centuries among many indigenous cultures around the world. And also in the blue humanities, a lot of the literature and the theories are nourished by or originate with writers and thinkers among the Pacific and the Afro-Caribbean diaspora. In my reading of this blue humanities literature, I find that there is a musical aspect to this shift from surface to submersion. Consider, for example, the geographers Philip Steinberg and Kimberly Peters. They wrestle with the inadequacy of established geographic models for capturing the ocean, and they propose their own concept of wet ontology to account for um, what they call the chaotic but rhythmic turbulence of the material world, in which, even amidst unique events of coming together, there is a persistent underlying churn, a dynamic pattern of repetition and reformation that provides stability and texture in an environment of underlying instability. So that is a mouthful, but I wanted to include this paragraph because when I read it, I was just immediately struck by how familiar this vocabulary is to me as a musician and musicologist. It's almost like I'm reading music analysis. They talk of rhythm, repetition, texture. These are musical terms. And the reliance on a musical vocabulary to describe the ocean suggests to me that there is an untapped potential for music and musicology to contribute to this shared task of fathoming the ocean. And in addition to the concepts listed by Steinberg and Peters, think also of terms like wave, siren, sounding. There are just so many terms that seem to travel easily across domains of oceanography and music. So I've been looking at this shared space, this common ground where the musical and the oceanic come together and enrich each other. And this is where I've been talking about oceanic aesthetics, which is music's ability to provide direct sensory bodily experiences of rhythm, duration, flow, and depth. And these are sensory experiences that correlate to the phenomenology of submersion, including the warping of distance and direction as conceived in visual terrestrial terms. So today my title is Voices of Water, and I will focus on the vocal or voice-like musical techniques for engaging the deep sea and for figuring out the human-ocean relationship. So my first example is from the Danish composer Else Marie Pade. She lived from 1924 to 2016. She is frequently described as the grandmother of electronic music in the Nordic countries. She was working at the Danish broadcasting radio studios in the late 1950s when she was tasked with creating the musical accompaniment and sound design to a radio adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, Den lille havfrue, or The Little Mermaid, originally written in the early 19th century. But this occasion became the composer's first venture into the realm of purely electronically generated sound, in search of the voice of the mermaid. Previously, Else Marie Pade had been experimenting with musical compositions based on recordings of everyday sounds in and around Copenhagen. In other words, concrete music, following the principles and theories of Pierre Schaeffer, whom she met on several occasions in the early 1950s when she was eagerly participating in seminars on new music in Paris. For The Little Mermaid, Pade used collages of everyday sounds from the city to accompany those parts of the narrative that takes place on land. And for the scenes below the surface, she used underwater ambience captured with submersed microphones. But when the narrative goes even deeper to these deep halls where the sea people sing, that's when she turned to synthesized sound. And this is in fact the first example of electronic music anywhere in the Nordic countries. So I have a short clip here from a documentary film where she describes how she encountered electronic music.
Med konkret musik, så kommer jeg til et eventyr, som jeg skal sætte musik til for skoleradioen. Der er så noget med nogle havfruer, der synger. Det kan hverken teknikerne eller jeg finde, og vi prøver alverdens ting, og jeg går op og taler med ingeniør Lauritsen, forklarer ham om mit problem, og så tænder han for en generator og drejer på nogle knapper, og der synger havfruerne nok så yndigt. Og derfra kommer jeg så videre til den elektroniske musik.
Okay, so she mentioned an engineer, that's Holger Lauritsen. She worked together with him and another audio technician called Willy Bach. And you can see here on the right is a page from their technical journal that they kept while trying to find the voice of the mermaid. So you can see they had made quite detailed notes, um, specifically indicating, this tone generator at this frequency, modulation frequency, ring modulation, this size, this type of reverb machine. And they even included a schematic of the various electronic circuits and how everything was connected, which means that we could potentially recreate this music as well because we have so detailed and rich descriptions from how they worked. I will play you now a clip from the finished, from this radio play, where the moment in the story where we are at the bottom of the sea, where the mermaids are singing, and the Little Mermaid is described as having the most beautiful sound. Unfortunately, the narration, this is a Danish actress reading the play. Her voice is mixed rather loud, which means that the music is a bit harder to hear, but we can hear it.
Som oplyste den hele sal og skinnede ud gennem væggen, så søen der udenfor var ganske oplyst. Midt igennem salen flød en bred, rindende strøm, og på den dansede havmænd og havfruer til deres dejlige sang. Så smukke stemmer har ikke menneskene på jorden. Den lille havfrue sang skønnest af dem alle, og de klappede i hænderne for hende. Og et øjeblik følte hun glæde i sit hjerte, til hun vidste, at hun havde den skønneste stemme af alle på jorden og i havet. Men
Okay, that was just a short clip, so you can hear what they ended up with. This is in a different place. Elsa Maria Pade described what she was looking for was a tone that was halfway between an operatic singer and a saw blade, so a musical saw. And they ended up with this theremin-like glissando in a soprano register, moving in wave-like melodic movements. So what's fascinating here is that the search for the voice of the mermaid occasioned the first venture into synthesized sound, analog synthesizers in the Nordic region. If you ask ChatGPT, what is the first piece of electronic music composed in Scandinavia, it will tell you something else. But this actually precedes the first experiments in Stockholm. But that's a different story. I'll move on to a different example, which is a famous example in the literature on hydromusical imaginations of the deep sea. You likely will know of Drexciya, who were an electronic music group consisting of James Stinson and Gerald Donald, founded in Detroit at the beginning of the 90s. Their techno music and their attendant mythos have inspired so much music and artwork in recent years, and it's also inspired a lot of cultural theory, especially and most famously the writings of Kodwo Eshun. Eshun approaches Drexciya as a sonic fiction, which is his term for a specific organization of sound combined with snatches of story and imagery that gesture towards but falls short of a narrative. There were these short cryptic messages printed on their vinyl records released from 1992 onwards to 97, which provided clues to this Drexciya mythos. A few tracks feature spoken lyrics that divulge further secrets of the Drexciya universe, but most tracks do not communicate so easily. The sonic fiction remained stubbornly elusive. Then, in 97, they released their first album, The Quest, which contained a printed message that finally explained this origin story. I'll quote it in its entirety. Could it be possible for humans to breathe underwater? A fetus in its mother's womb is certainly alive in an aquatic environment. During the greatest Holocaust the world has ever known, pregnant America-bound African slaves were thrown overboard by the thousands during labor for being sick and disruptive cargo. Is it possible that they could have given birth at sea to babies that never needed air? Are Drexians water-breathing, aquatically mutated descendants of those unfortunate victims of human greed? The Horrors of the Middle Passage is reimagined as an origin story of African Americans, and this is speculative fiction, but it nonetheless captures the fact of the matter and the lived experience, where the slave trade is what brought about and continues to shape the lives of African Americans. The 1993 record, 12-inch extended play, Bubble Metropolis, is made up of side A, titled Fresh Water, side B is called Salt Water, and the track titles take us on a journey progressively down into the deep, through the aqua wormhole, past Positron Island and beyond the abyss, where we finally arrive at the Bubble Metropolis. Musically speaking, Drexciya builds on a standard techno palette of analog synthesizers and drum machines. There are kick and snare sounds from the Roland TR-808, and they make good use of the arpeggiator function on the Korg mono-poly synthesizer, which was a favorite of theirs, used on most tracks. The arpeggiator creates this continuous swirling movement that really churn the bodies on the dance floor. On top of the analog synths and 808s, Drexciya added a bubbly palette of wet-sounding echo effects, sonar pings, depth charges, and diving sounds, so that the music really submerses the listener in the deep groove of the Black Atlantic. But like Else Marie Pade's synthesized voice of the mermaid, there are voices in the deep halls of the Drexians as well. In the track Bubble Metropolis, we can hear a sample of spoken word that provide the listener ocean journeyer specific instructions upon their arrival in the underwater city. We can listen to a clip from this track, just a short clip.
Norwegian Cruiser 8-203X. You are now clear for docking. Have a nice stay here in Drexciya. I'm Drexian Cruiser Controller X205. If you have any problems, let me know. Bubble Control 1 out.
Yeah, just a short clip there from Bubble Metropolis by Drexciya, featuring the voice of this controller, presumably a Drexian that never needed air. My third example, in 2004, the composer, singer, and artist Björk was commissioned to perform at the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games in Athens. In collaboration with fellow Icelander lyricist and poet Sean, she produced this avant-garde performance, which achieves a kind of merging of the human and the ocean on many levels, lyrical, musical, and visual. The song Oceania celebrates the oceanic origins of human societies. Björk inhabits the role of Mother Ocean, and she addresses the various nations gathered in the Olympic arena as her children, implicating them in a harmonious ecology of watery life forms. And this song presents an opportunity to further explore the significance of voice in Western imaginations of the ocean. The musical texture of Oceania consists solely of human voices. There's the voice of Björk herself, and then there's a choir and a beatbox artist providing the percussive elements. So it's all vocals. If we listen to the studio recording, which appears on the Medulla album, we can hear this wordless female choir, which is immediately striking. The voices seem to flow in wave-like melodic movement. On their first entrance, the voices ascend from the depths of a low bass register upwards to the high soprano. On their second appearance, the voices plummet back down along 4 octaves of vertical movement. Such disregard for the limitations of the female vocal range is not possible in acoustic performance. In this case, voices belonging to the choir have been sampled, with the samples adjusted to different pitches along an extended tonal range, with the choir then played using a MIDI keyboard. In conceiving and producing this digital choir, Björk has made no effort to hide the technological treatment involved. Rather, the vocals admit to their digital processing by sounding eerily synthetic. The resulting effect is uncanny. The voices are recognizably human in origin, yet they move and sound in ways that are not possible in acoustic performance. Let's hear a clip from the opening of the recording. Just a short clip again. And these voices were described by Björk as sirens, so connecting them to the same cultural archetype that, a sibling of the mermaid. But this is a folkloric archetype that's found in folk legends of most human cultures around the world, beings dwelling in or near water, at once human-like and non-human, frequently human fish or human bird hybrids. The siren is often female, and her defining characteristic, shared across all her different appearances, is her musical abilities, and especially her vocal powers. Just like H.C. Andersen's The Little Mermaid, where the main character, the titular Little Mermaid, is described as having the most beautiful voice of all the sea people. So this association between human-ocean hybrids and voice and song speaks to the siren's liminal position on the borders of the human realm, calling out from an aquatic existence in between the imagination and the senses. I'll play another clip from a different point on the recording, where the sirens seem to be literally representing aspects of the song lyrics, including imitating animal sounds, such as the particularly chaotic vocal shouts that enter on the words, "Hawks and sparrows race in my waters." So here we can hear how this choir of digital sirens exceed human vocalization, perhaps voicing the sounds of an aquatic ancestor, considering the song's evolutionary narrative, or simply suggesting the animality of the human when seen from the perspective of its marine mother. When performing Oceania in 2004, Björk placed the present historical moment, the Olympic Games, into a deeper evolutionary and ecological context, using Siren Song to acknowledge the oceanic origins of the human species and to dissolve boundaries between humans and other marine life forms. Björk, in the role of Mother Ocean, sing to her children, modern humans, and thereby frames them within a broader community of descent. This is Charles Darwin's term for the shared characteristics and evolutionary trajectories that expose modern humans as an amalgamation of creatures both other than and the source of the species. Björk's song imbricates the human into a network of life forms, both terrestrial and aquatic, all carrying within them the inheritance of their ancestral sea. The song lyrics to Oceania connects this distant evolutionary past with the immediacy of our present bodily existence. The final line of lyrics reads, "Your sweat is salty, I am why." By emphasizing these deep evolutionary connections, Björk renders the relationship between humans and the ocean as perfectly natural and harmonious. I wonder if this might effectively ignore centuries of human exploitation of marine creatures and ecologies, not to mention the present human destruction of ocean habitats through trawling, dumping, and drilling. I wonder if Mother Ocean turned up to sing us a song, would she not be a bit angry with our recent behavior? Björk's ocean seems impervious to human harm, which is hardly a productive starting point for marine environmentalism. As we face the Anthropocene ocean, the figure of a timeless and benefactory mother might be in need of revision. This figure is inspiring, utopian, but it is obviously not the whole story, and it does little to illuminate the terms and conditions of environmental justice on a blue planet in distress. I do think that Björk's performance and her narrative of oceanic origins might spur a sense of kinship with marine creatures, which can certainly promote conservation efforts. But these same musical techniques conflate human and marine life in ways that obscure responsibility. So, to conclude, my three examples, Else Marie Pade, Drexia, and Björk, all use the most advanced music technology of their day in order to submerge the human. So, working from these examples, we can glimpse an alliance between the oceanic imagination, electronic music, and a futurist post-human thinking. And this alliance runs through the second half of the 20th century. Else Marie Pade used the first generation of sine tone generators and ring modulators to craft a musical voice for the sea people. And similarly, Björk used cutting-edge music technology, in this case digital sampling and processing, to achieve her choir of sirens. Both examples respond to the underwater environment and its challenges to human subjectivity, with the potential to generate new post-humanisms. Margaret Cohen and Killian Quigley write, subaqueous phenomena can appear to frustrate humanism's fundamental terms. Much as human submarine relations vary enormously across place, culture, and time, the undersea is basically not anthropic. And this might be why all these examples turn to electronic music and synthesized sound to extend the human or to move beyond the anthropic But still, there are vocal or voice-like elements in all of this music, which suggests that there might still be a place for the human or the post-human in the ecologies of the sea. But we could also suggest that this marriage between electronic sound and futurist or avant-garde sonic fictions of the ocean might just be evidencing or perpetuating this tenacious idea of the ocean as a frontier and as an alien space, an empty space where the human imagination is free to flourish and to fill in the deeps with stories of mermaids, sirens, and Drexians. Yeah, so that's food for thought, I guess. I need to end my talk now as I've used my allotted time. But thank you for listening, and I hope that this might inspire some further questions and discussion on musical engagements with the ocean and how that might be enabling, but also in some cases restricting a more adequate understanding of ocean ecologies and marine life. So I would love to have those kinds of discussions. So thank you so much for listening, and I will stop sharing now.